Hello and welcome to Computer Science 30S. This is lesson 5, composition of functions. This particular lesson is a little bit longer than the last one, and this is sort of the last one in the series of lessons regarding blocks. And at the end of this lesson, there will be a hand-in assignment to see where you're at. Let's begin. Our custom-made blocks are blocks like any other, and we can use them in other block definitions. To demonstrate this, we're going to make a block that computes the maximum of 3 values. So after this lesson, you will know what the terms composition of functions and recursion refer to. You will understand the efficiency of building custom blocks out of other custom blocks, and you should be able to create a new block out of other custom blocks. So let's go ahead and begin. You should repeat the steps from a previous tutorial to make this version of the max block, also only allowing number inputs. Then in the script for the block, we can use 2 copies of our previous max block. Okay. Make sure again that you uncheck atomic. We'll worry about that in the future. So we're going to create a new max value block that accepts 3 inputs, and then it reports the maximum of the first one and the max of the other 2. So it checks the third one, the y and the second and third. It checks y and z, figures out which one is the biggest of those 2, and then it compares the biggest of those 2 with x, and then reports the bigger of those 2, which of course would be the bigger of all 3. So using one of your max value blocks that you created before, or if you need to recreate one, go ahead and do that. Just take a few minutes and try to do this on your own, and then I'm going to show you the answer right away. So pause the video right now. Okay, hopefully you gave that a try. I've got my version of BYOB here. You've probably got a newer version, but very same idea. I've got a max value block that I've created previously, and I'm going to use that in my new one. So I'm going to create a new block here. It's going to be an operator, and it's going to report, and I'm going to call it, likely my notes say something different, but I'm going to say max value, and I'm going to have x and y and z. And in here, whoops, I'm going to use this one right here. And I'm going to need 2 of those. So it's going to find the maximum value of y and z, and then it's going to find the maximum of those 2 and compare that with the maximum, or with just the value of x. And I should be able to report that right ahead like that. Let's see how this works. Okay. I'm going to need 3 inputs here just to test this. So I'm going to ask for the first number, and I'm going to get the answer. Again, I'm going to need, oh, I've got my num1 and num2 here still. That's good. I'm going to need a third one. Call it num3. Okay, so I'm going to set num1 equal to my answer. And let's duplicate this block. Whoops, I should have duplicated the whole thing. Get rid of that. Duplicate the whole thing. Duplicate the whole thing once more. Push it all together. This will be second number. Set that equal to num2. Here I'm going to have third number. Set that equal to number 3. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to use my new block that I've created here, max value of all 3. Like so. I realized that I was supposed to do this. Make sure that they were only numbers. This should just be a number right there. X and Y and Z should all just be numbers. Like so. Okay, let's see if this works. First number, I'll make 6, 12, and 8. And it tells me that the bigger is 12. Okay, so you've seen here how you can create a new block Last time we called it max value of x, y, and z, and we used an old one here. We composed the functions. We put the functions together, put the blocks together. That's known as composition of functions. Now, when a custom-made block calls itself, this is something special, and we call this recursion. Now, this particular example that I showed you is not technically recursion, since the 3-value max value block doesn't call itself, but it does illustrate a block calling another block. This is a fundamental idea in computer science, is building larger and larger blocks out of smaller and smaller tools. And I've given the example of a car. A car is a very complex machine built out of smaller machines, and every one of those smaller machines inside the car is built out of smaller and smaller parts. And that's how you build a car. You have very tiny little parts that do very specific tiny little jobs, and as you put all those tiny jobs together, it does a more complex job, and then those more complex jobs are put all together to create the car or the house or whatever it is, complex machine that you're building. Very fundamental idea in computer science. More on recursion, likely not until grade 12. A very challenging concept, but a very useful concept. Okay, so I'd like you to do a little bit of practice here. I'd like you to create a new block that accepts 3 values to be added together. It should look sort of like this. I'm going to make that a bit bigger for you because it's kind of tiny to see. I'd like you to create this block right here. And inside this, very similar to the max value one, you're going to have to do something like that. So go ahead and try that. I suggest you pause the video here while you try that, and be sure to show me and ask me for help if you need it. Okay, so let's move on here. We're going to use various reporter blocks that can create a figure similar to this. Previously, we've done this part right here, this top triangle, and then we've done this bottom triangle here. Now we're going to add this third one down here. We're going to use composition of functions to make this a very efficient program. And here's our pseudocode. We're going to get the start position from the mouse click. So you should be able to click there, and it starts right there. I want you to draw a triangle using a block that you've already created. I want you to change the x by the triangle side length. In other words, if this triangle is 100 long, then it changes the x by 100. It draws a triangle using the same block, right like that. I then change the x and y to the upper peak of triangle 1, this spot right here. We're going to modify this particular piece of code right here to use 2 new blocks that determine peak x and peak y. So I'm going to, given a triangle, given a click position here, I want to be able to create any x and y, any position that I click, it automatically will figure out what this x and y position is right here, so that I know my start position for my next top triangle like that, okay? And I'm going to draw that top triangle like that. So let's go ahead and show you the steps to do that. So we're going to get the start position from the mouse click. This is the same pseudocode as before, and you'll notice that all of this code right here will become a block called draw 3 triangles. That is then repeated to get the lower left, down here, and lower right triangle. So we're going to start with just one group of 3 triangles, and then we're going to repeat it 3 times to draw the whole thing. We're going to compose our program is going to be composed of many functions all put together. We're going to build a car out of a bunch of small parts. Okay, so let's start with allowing the user to start the drawing by clicking to show where you want to start it. I'd like you to reproduce this code right here. It says wait until mouse is down, and when it is, I want the sprite to go to the X and Y positions of the mouse. I'd ask, the program should then ask for the size and wait, and then it should set the size equal to the answer, and then broadcast, begin drawing. You should remember what a broadcast is from grade 10 computer science. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, I've got my screen set up here now. I should be able to work where I can see my notes and work at the same time. So we're going to make, when my green flag is clicked, I'm going to wait. And I'm going to wait until the mouse is down. Once the mouse is down, then I'm going to go to the X and Y mouse positions, like so. Sends my sprite to wherever I'd clicked. I'm going to ask for the size. And I'm going to wait. I should have a question mark in there. I'm going to set my size. I need a variable called size. No, I don't want that. I want that. I'm going to set my size equal to answer, and I'm going to set up a broadcast, and I'm going to make it say begin drawing, like so. Okay, so hopefully you follow those steps. I'll pause here for a moment. If you need to pause the video, go ahead and do that. All right, now we're going to create the midpoint block. Okay, let's go back to our pseudocode a little bit here. Okay, remember that we are going to move to the peak here. So we need to set the midpoint. The peak of this triangle here is the midpoint. The x coordinate right here is the is the midpoint of these two right here. Let me just show you what I mean. So if I've got, that's one x value, and that's another x value. This x value here is the same as that x value there. So this is the midpoint of those two x's, and that's equal to the x value right there. So let's create this midpoint block. You can pick whatever category you want for your block. It really doesn't matter. This category tells BYOB that what tab to put your block in. It'll work exactly the same way no matter what category it's in. It's just a way of sort of organizing things. For our first block, we'll make it a reporter. In BYOB, a reporter is a block that returns a value. Java calls it a return method. Liberty Basic calls it a function. Lots of different names for it. It's generically called a function. What this block is going to do is take 2 points and find the midpoint. We'll need that later in our triangle block. So create a new block called midpoint as shown. It should likely be a green operator block. So go ahead and do that. There's 2 ways to do that here. This is probably the simplest. Just report, take 0.1 and 0.2, add them together, divide by 2. Note the use of the report command here. You could also create a variable for the midpoint and then use the report box at the bottom. This is kind of the way I showed it to you before. We're going to create a function called midpoint that receives 0.1 and 0.2. I'm going to create a script variable called midpoint. I'm going to set midpoint to 0.1 plus 0.2 to all divided by 2, and then I'm going to report mid, or you can actually use this report command right here. So let's just show you how to do that. Let's go ahead and create a new block. Make this a little bit smaller so I can see. I'm going to create a new one here, which is going to be an operator, and we're going to call it midpoint. And we're going to take the values of PT.1 and PT2, like so. And I'm going to use report over here. Divide by 2, and I'm going to plug that in there. That's implied brackets, by the way. 0.1, 0.2, and I'm simply going to add the 2 together, divide by 2, and I'm going to report it, just like that. I've created my midpoint block. Okay, if you need to take a moment and pause to follow that, go ahead and pause the video here. Okay, let's continue. The next step is to create 2 reporter blocks that determine the peak X and peak Y positions. So from the start position, the lower left right here, the peak X is the midpoint of the start position and the start position plus the side length. Okay, so remember, if my side length is, say, let's just assume here that the side length is 100, just for a way we can talk about it. Okay, if I get my X position down here, let's assume I've clicked on X47. Well, then this X position over here is going to be at 147. And this X position right here is going to be the midpoint of 47 and 147, okay? Because this X right here is equal to that midpoint right there. Remember, this 100 here is the length of the side, okay? So from the start position, the lower left, the peak X right here is equal to the midpoint of the start position and the start position plus the side length. So use the existing midpoint function that we just created and create a new block called find peak X, and it's going to start with start value, which is this X value right here, and the length of the side. And we're going to report that back. I think this is wrong. I'm going to have to do this right in my answers here. I'm pretty sure that this is not correct right here. So let's create a new block. And we're going to call it find peak X. And we're going to send it two values. We're going to send it start. And we're going to send it length. Oh, and I forgot to make it a green one. So let's go back and do that. Find, I wonder if it will let me do this. Peak X. Start percent length. Will it let me do it? Yes, it did. Okay, so find peak X is going to be equal to the midpoint of the starting position and the start position. Oh, no, I'm wrong. This is correct. I did do it right the first time. So I'm going to report back the value of, and here's where I get to use my previously defined block called midpoint. I'm going to report back the midpoint of start and length. Oh no, there is a mistake here. I do see it. I knew there was something wrong with that. It's going to midpoint of start, and this is my mistake. I didn't have this in here. It should be start plus the length. Okay, so back to my original discussion. If the X position is 100, or sorry, 47, and my length is 100, then I'm going to go 47. Start plus length is 47 plus 100 is 147. I'm going to find the midpoint of 47 and 147, and that's what I'm going to report back as my peak X. Oh, I have a problem here. I did not create the right kind of midpoint block. Not good. I'm going to have to go back and fix that. Midpoint is a command, and it should be an operator. So we're going to have to, let me see if I can actually fix that. No, I'm going to have to recreate that. I did that wrong. Not good. Let's create an operator. That is a reporter. Call it midpoint. Hopefully you didn't make this mistake as well. Midpoint. I think we used PT1 and PT2. That's better. And we're going to have to report the control. I'm going to have to report here. This is the one where I just have to redo this. We all make mistakes, that's for sure. Sometimes the silliest mistakes can cost you. Okay, let's see if that will work now. Now let's create a block called, and let's just make sure I've got the right kind here, find peak X, right? And find peak X is a reporter block, so let's make sure that I make that operator, reporter block. Find peak X, start length, GTH. Oh yeah, I'm going to have to recreate that one. Find peak X. Let's delete that one. Like so. I think I'm on the right track here. Oh no, I did it wrong again. You're probably laughing at me, aren't you? Just goes to show you that you need to take your time when you're doing this. It's going to be an operator, and it's going to be a reporter. Find peak X. Start and length. I got to find it now so I can delete it. Okay, many mistakes today. Find peak X percent start and percent length. Don't mess it up. It's going to be an operator. It's going to be a reporter. All right, I finally got it. Okay, we're going to find the peak X, and we're going to use midpoint here. Let me see if I've got midpoint. I do. And I'm going to report my peak X is equal to the midpoint between the start and and here's where I did have that previous mistake on my actual notes here. And here I'm going to have to take start length, and I'm going to have to go through this with you one more time. Let's just see if I can get this to work. Okay, maybe we should test this. My test, I'm going to get my mouse X and my mouse Y, and I'm going to broadcast begin drawing. Let's just see if these things work. Let's take that out. And how are we going to test this here? I'm going to need my, let's find the peak X here. And let's use variables, size, and size is the side length, and the mouse X is my starting position. Okay, so wherever I click, let's just go to that position. Go to. We'll just use the mouse Y as our test. Okay, see if this works here. So I click here, ask me for the size, I say 100, and it moves over that particular. Seems like it's going to work. We might need to do a little bit more testing, but I think we've got things complete. All right, so lots of mistakes there. So this should read right here, if you're following along at home, and hopefully you are. This should read right here. Start plus length. Okay. Find peak Y is going to be even tougher, as you're going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem. Here's the logic behind it. I think what I'm going to do here, because this is so long, is I'm going to break this into 2 videos, just in the chance that you're not going to be able to complete this video in this particular sitting. You've got almost 24 minutes of video here. I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to make part 2.